Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our reaction and review for True Detective Season 4, Episode 1. I know this season is also subtitled Night Country.
Mhm.
I don't know who's going to call it Night Country, but that's,
It'll probably be the only time we do.
yeah, that's where we are with it. But no, this episode, we learned a lot about our lead characters,
Mhm.
Danvers and Navarro. We sort of were introduced to this community of Ennis, Alaska. They said that, mining very much important. We're going to do a lot of mining in this video. We're going to try to mine and dig our way into some theories and ideas as to what in the world is going on with these two different cases that are kind of being run. One's in the past, but it's also playing into what's happening in the present.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, what is the connection here? We know that there's this like pink parka that was in the past that was with Annie and now is seemingly on one of the scientists, Clark, with this happy patch on it. We'll get into that. But also, there's the mystery of the tongue that was found up there. Whose tongue is this? Is it actually Annie's or is this someone else's? And that whoever killed Annie has been killing other people, and that this is part of their, I guess we'll call it trademark. Like you're going to cut out people's tongues? It's terrible.
This show can be pretty graphic. It can be pretty weird. I think we can say that this premiere, which also included possible ghosts, files itself under all of the above.
Also, Fiona Shaw, for all you Fiona Shaw fans out there like me. I absolutely loved her on Killing Eve. I know not everyone loved the Carolyn character, but I truly did.
As a well-known Carolyn hater for all of the coverage of Killing Eve. No, I do really like Fiona Shaw.
I love her.
To me, this is the Fiona Shaw redemption. Congratulations, you're playing a character here I like a lot more so far than Carolyn from Killing Eve.
Rose is strange.
Yeah, okay, well, these videos for True Detective Season 4 here at the channel are going to be full of strange ideas, theories, all sorts of good stuff. Hit that subscribe button because that is the best way to make sure you do not miss any of our coverage. And also, if you love murder mysteries, we are also covering here Monsieur Spade, which premiered today on AMC and AMC Plus. It is an excellent show with a lot of theorizing to be done there as well.
Absolutely. That is a great show. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, you definitely should.
Okay, so here are the facts. Like, we'll start here by actually getting into the fact. Thank you. News flash. Okay, here's what happened. So we have the Salal Research Station, which, as someone who has watched a lot of videos on YouTube about like remote places and how they live, like I am about as much of an expert on this subject as anyone who sits around and watches YouTube is. They did a pretty good job of replicating what a remote research station in Alaska would look like. There was a small group of people that were all there working on various things to try to better understand, life, the universe, and everything. This delivery person shows up there to give them their Funyuns, kind of wanders around, hears the music, and everybody is seemingly gone. And we have this just group of people who just have vanished without a trace in the middle of endless night in Alaska.
Yeah. And the only thing that's there is this tongue. Now, by the end of the episode, we have found our scientists. They are out in the snow thanks to Rose / Fiona Shaw playing Rose in this, where she is seeing the ghost of Travis. And we saw this throughout the episode where he kept showing up. He's trying to tell her something and he brings her to where these scientists are, where they are discovered by Danvers and Navarro.
This really does raise a very big interesting question at the heart of this show. Are ghosts real? And I mean, I say that partially joking, but partially not, because there has to be some sort of reason why Rose was brought to this place. It's either, there's an actual ghost showing her this, or this is a case of something within her, subconscious that's sort of leading her here, some sort of secret that she has had or secret that she has forgotten. And I am a big believer, especially in a show like this, of what I like to call the Scooby-Doo phenomenon, where you spend like the whole episode thinking that ghosts are actually real, and then eventually something gets unmasked. I am sitting here with my full heart and soul saying that I believe that there is going to be a scientific explanation for everything that we are getting. And if not, I will eat the massive L on camera in front of all of you guys.
Listen, they definitely are playing with those themes this season. I mean, Navarro was asked, "Do you believe in God?" She says yes. There's definitely something that feels spiritual or otherworldly about everything with the, she's awake, that, was said multiple times in this, including Danvers hearing it, including Navarro hearing it right before she runs into the one-eyed polar bear. It's sort of giving me those Lost vibes. I mean,
Mhm.
where we kind of ran into the polar bear on
Yeah.
the island, but they were also playing with those themes of science versus faith and sort of where does that all lie, things that are otherworldly, or is everything got an answer to it that makes sense?
Okay. She's awake. Well, back at the Salal research station, before all the disappearance happened, Clark
Mhm,
has his little freak out, which is
mhm.
something we can get into here a little bit more as I try to put on a tinfoil hat.
All right, let's
So,
get into some theories.
okay. He says she's awake, and that's sort of the last thing we get out of any of these people living at the research
Mhm,
station. And clearly, something has come over him before he says this, and we
mhm,
know about the tongue that was found there. It feels to me like they're doing a lot of research, or at least one person is doing a lot of research on some sort of DNA or possibly even, a living human. And I wonder a lot because in a lot of these sort of remote places, you often see a lot of research that's being done about like how can we further society? How can we make planet Earth hospitable for, future generations? This is something that was a little bit in A Murder at the End of the World that we talked
mhm.
about not that long ago, but you
What
could
a fun show that was.
it was a really fun show, but that concept was there, and I kind of feel like there are some sort of similar experiments perhaps going on here. And I mean, this is a really just nasty thing to think about, but this is a very dark show.
Mhm.
Are they perhaps like collecting pieces of DNA and sort of comprising? I don't want to call it like their own version of Dr. Frankenstein creating a person here, but I think they are doing something where they're experimenting on someone or something that's creating this sort of illusion or idea of life on the other side of it so they can use this in order to further along future generations. But like with creating any sort of experiment, if things go really, really wrong, there are consequences. And something bad came over Clark before he said that, whether it is a disease, whether it is something that is caused by an interaction he may have had with this experiment.
Yeah, and I mean, She's Away came into Danvers and Navarro as well, and they both ended up back at the facility again. Okay, let's talk about that tongue.
Yes.
That tongue that was found, we don't know whose tongue it is at this point. I'm assuming at some point that they're going to try to do some sort of DNA, run it through the system, see if anything pops, to see if maybe this is Annie's, where it's been like frozen for like however many years, and now it's de-thawed up here. We do know that Clark was seemingly wearing the same parka, so would he be involved in what happened to Annie, or is he maybe involved in doing this to other people? Is he involved in this in any kind of way? But is this tongue Annie's, frozen for years, de-thawed up here, or is this tongue somebody else's, and that maybe one of these scientists is some sort of a serial killer? Leave it in the comments for us. Whose tongue is this?
I am right now believing that it's Annie's just because they made such a real point in this episode of being like, okay, when Navarro found Annie, she didn't have the tongue. The tongue was cut off. Here's a tongue that's somewhere else in the research station. And yes, you can easily say, okay, this might be somebody who is killing multiple victims. And it just feels like to me, you can have this tongue be Annie's and it still doesn't answer a lot. Like you still have the questions of, okay, not only who did this, but also why are you holding on to the tongue? And then with all these disappearances, why are you then leaving the tongue behind for everyone to see? Unless whoever is responsible for either getting these people out there or maybe whatever this quote unquote sickness that Clark had, maybe he sort of passed it along to everyone else. They were all kind of influenced or led astray, and whoever is responsible for this wanted to leave the tongue there as a clue as to, okay, here is a taste of some of what was going on here. Maybe this can kind of point you in the right direction.
Okay, I feel like the tongue is not Annie's, and for a couple reasons. I
Mhm.
mean, one, I like the idea that it is someone who's been doing this a long time and they just haven't been able to catch that person. I always like those kinds of mysteries where it's somebody that's been getting away with it for a really long time, and we have these two detectives that do not get along very well, and we've seen that. This gives me a lot of warm and fuzzies from season one, where we had two detectives that did not
Yeah.
really get along, but they had to figure it out together. Two very complicated men. Now we have two very complicated women that don't really get along, but they're going to have to try to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so the idea that this is someone who's been evading them for a really long time, that they haven't really been able to figure out. I know Danvers said that she came on the case after Navarro had already closed it and moved on, sort of thing. They had that little bit of a confrontation where she was like, hey, you didn't help anything. And Danvers was like, you already had closed the case by the time I got there. Like, you can't put this on me. I wasn't involved in it. Like, I'm involved in it now, but I
Mhm.
wasn't involved in it then, sort of thing. And just for like a tongue that's been around for however many years, 8 years, 10 years, I
Mhm.
don't know how long this exactly has been going on for. For those of you who don't know, I'm a former funeral director, so I have a lot of experience with dead bodies. So the idea that there's a tongue, unless it's frozen for all this time or out a little bit, back in frozen solid, his tongue wouldn't look like this anymore 8 years later, 7 years later, 10 years later. It would just be a decomposing puddle of goo. Like, it just wouldn't look like this anymore. So if the person is keeping it as some sort of like trophy or souvenir or whatever it is, they would absolutely have to be keeping it frozen, like a block of ice, carrying it around with them. So they would have had to somehow get it wherever they've traveled in life to get it up there, which means that then, to me, one of those scientists is the same person that obviously killed Annie, and they're up there.
I think the idea distance on this show is really important because this research station, they made a key point of noting it's like this many miles above the Arctic Circle, and there's
Mhm.
not a lot of people who are up there. If you have watched any of these YouTube videos like I have about these places, like it often is a situation where in this case we saw supplies drove in, some cases they're flown in, whatever
Mhm.
else. It's just that amount of distance obviously severely lowers your suspect list, but it also
Mhm.
can be used, unfortunately, by various ne'er-do-wells as sort of this way to create confusion because everybody talks to each other. Everybody spreads rumors all over the place, and it makes it so that it's very hard to get stories straight. And I think the complication that's going to come up here with this tongue is that because this very small community's all gone, you don't really have anybody to talk to there. But even if you did, there would probably be a lot of information that doesn't really line up. Or because this was such a very presumably tight knit group up there, they may have all either been working together or working to cover for each other, that they're not going to leave many clues. And this is where this is going to be a really tough case to solve for all of these different reasons. And also, you're dealing with a lot of local small communities that may not be altogether trusting of people like Danvers
Mhm.
throughout, the past several decades. So there may be a lot of people out there who are just not reported as missing, not people in law enforcement may not even be aware of them, and that
Mhm.
creates another problem unto itself.
Yeah, and it also makes me wonder, like, how many, if our killer is one of these scientists, how many of these scientists are involved or know about something that's going on? Because again, if you're going to have a tongue up there, it's got to be somewhere where it's going to be preserved. And they are out in the snow, so they could have buried it
Yeah.
out in the snow or whatever, but if they've kept it inside, somewhere inside the freezer or something like that, other people will have run into it. So, the killer going to come up there and just drop it in a snowbank and be like, I'll see you a little bit later.
Okay. I'm landing where there's I don't think every scientist is involved, but I think at least two of them are, just because
Mm.
it's very hard to hide things in a small enclosed place like this.
Mm.
Like you need to have somebody who's probably covering for you, who's probably involved. And that's why I'm hoping moving forward we see a lot of like checking of various records and terminals, because if you are doing what you're supposedly meant to be doing up there, you are probably documenting everything from like the length of your toenails to like how well a certain, flora is growing at a particular point. Like there should be information up there that's valuable.
Yeah, and I mean, is it possible though that this tongue made it up there in a supernatural way? Because again, there is that push and pull of science versus sort of the supernatural thing. I mean, this whole show opened up with, the scope looking down at all the deer who then all of a sudden just started like jumping over the side. Like it felt very spiritual, like something was, frightening them, something was happening. They were warning about something. Like it didn't feel like it was more like science. It felt like something was happening.
The thing with True Detective is that there's obviously an element of spirituality that exists within most of the seasons. I mean, season 2, I personally try to imagine isn't
And
canon,
I
but
just
like,
pretend that like it never happened.
but like there is that element that exists with that show. Like another crazy idea that I do have though is this idea that is somebody just sort of dressing up as Travis and just sort of running around at various points so that they can be recognized to the point where it completely goes out the window as anything that can be used as whether it's leverage, whether it's knowledge, because if a lot of people are sort of
Mhm.
seeing it, it's another way to create confusion like we saw with this kid early on in the episode. I believe this kid's name was Darwin, was
Yep.
drawing something, a local legend. And so there's that, and then there's everything with Rose at the end of the episode, and the idea that you're seeing something pop up in all these different ways. It's I don't know, it's just pulling a lot at me that it's like, okay, you're all seeing the same ghost and we're expected to believe it. I can't get on board with that unless show is just being really weird.
Yeah, and I mean, the show can be a little bit weird like that, where it does have a little bit of that. Is it really happening? Is it not really happening?
Okay, so the tension between Danvers and Navarro right now, I think it's existing on multiple different levels in that
Hmm.
it feels like Danvers is somebody who just wants to kind of deal with exactly something that's right in front of her. And if she can't get an exact answer right away, she's just willing to sort of throw something out there as an excuse, basically. Like she says in this episode, Innes killed Annie. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, sure, being in this community can be very hard for a number of different reasons, but it's like I think she even knows at the end of the day that that's not true. But I think that sort of attitude is what's frustrating Navarro and what's pushing Navarro to get back to the research station,
Hmm.
where I think all loose ends are meant to be tied up. But moving forward, I think the two of them are going to have to acknowledge each other's perspectives if they want to get anywhere with this.
Yeah, I think that them actually working on this case now hopefully is going to repair a bit of their relationship. I mean, it sounds like it didn't start out that well, where Navarro was really pushing Danvers to get this case opened up again. She was like, no, it's closed, it's done, we're moving on, we're going into other things. And Navarro just couldn't let it go. And eventually she just got bounced completely off of everything because she was just knocking on the wrong doors and upsetting the wrong people. And it all just kind of blew up in her face. But now she's at this point where she's like, you guys all like push me out the door. You thought that this was nonsense. And now here we are with this tongue, with this jacket. Like there are clearly connections. So, I wasn't wrong and you should have reopened it. Where then we have on the other side Danvers being like, okay, yeah, the tongue is here now and the jacket's here now, but it wasn't here then. So, to get these two women on the same page, I think it's going to take a couple episodes, but we're going to get there. It's unfortunate that this is such a short season.
It really it makes it really difficult, especially with like the pseudo supernatural way that this show can be told, where we sit and look at things and we don't even know how to gauge if they're real. Okay, so there's a few other things in this episode that I don't think we can fully dismiss them. Like they're not on the same level as like Travis the local legend or like some other things that are going on right now, but there's some sort of incident that happened in Danvers past that was, called out within this episode. It involves drinking on some level. We saw
Mhm.
the arrest that happened earlier on,
Mhm.
and there might not be any connection at all between what's going on here and what's actually happening in the research station at the present. But I think it's fair at this point to wonder, was there somebody involved in an accident many, many years ago that may have had some connection either to Annie or some other people that will kind of eventually surface in all this? We all know a big theme of True Detective is cops have very, very dark secrets that they try to hide.
Yeah, and I mean that might just be it. Is this did feel like, we got the good mystery and it set the table really well for, what happened to these scientists and how are they involved with what happened to Annie, but this show also really did a good job setting the table of the backgrounds of Danvers, of Navarro, of what is going on in their lives and what makes them, complicated women and not just at their jobs but away from their jobs, and how that can then come into their jobs. It's one of the things that True Detective does better than any other show when they get it right. We're not talking about season 2.
Now, okay, one other thing I want to point out, I forgot to mention this earlier when it comes to Annie, is that she was stabbed like 32 times. And she was stabbed with something that was like a star-like wound or something, and they never really found the weapon. Like, the reason that this is interesting to me right now is it signals a couple of different things. Like, you mentioned a serial killer thing earlier.
Mhm.
Like, that's a possibility here, somebody who's trying to send a deliberate message or have some sort of like calling card. But just in general, there's no reason to do this unless you're just like a really gruesome, terrible individual. The only other idea that comes to mind here is, once again, in the name of science, is this something where with these wounds you're trying to like, inject something out of her or take something out of her that you're using for another purpose? Because it is just like, why do this?
Yeah, I mean, star shaped, when they said that, my first thought was like a screwdriver with that star shape end on it.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, yeah, what we still don't know exactly what the motive is. We know what they think the motive might be, but we don't know for sure yet because we don't know who's behind it yet.
This is really one of those shows that like 3 or 4 episodes from now we'll probably have enough answers that we can sit back, look at this first episode, and kick ourselves straight in the head for being like, how did we not understand or
I
figure this out yet?
know.
But that's really what this show is. It's dealing a lot in metaphors, it's dealing a lot in these broad mysteries. But this is, I think, a really, really interesting premiere. I think Jodie Foster, awesome throughout all of this.
Yeah, she the whole cast. Let's just be the whole cast. Everyone was so good in this. Like, it was so well cast. Very well written, great mystery so far. So far, I'm feeling really good about the season. I know we're only into episode 1,
Yeah.
but listen, season 2 was so bad that getting even just one episode of that same feeling that I had when I watched the first season, where I was like, this is some of the best TV I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like, easily ever seen that first season. So starting off on that same sort of foot where I'm feeling very similar vibes from season 1, like if they can keep that up, would be thrilled.
Well, we'll see exactly what happens from here, but rest assured we will have a lot of discussion and theories. This is such a dense show that I'm sure there's probably 1,000 of them out there already. But you know what? Hit that subscribe button so you guys don't miss any other True Detective coverage. Also, be sure to check out our Patreon. Our link is in the description. We have live streams over there about True Detective every week. Thank you to our patrons for your
Thank you.
support. We'll see you here next time.